What if taking a break from alcohol didn't mean giving something up, but rather getting yourself back? Could saying no to the nightly pour open the door to better sleep, steadier moods, and real connection? For many women, that single decision changes everything. Welcome to All About You. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, GP and women's health advocate. Every week, I share evidence-based conversations that help you navigate the changes of midlife with clarity and confidence. In this episode, Sarah Rusbatch returns to discuss alcohol in midlife. If you haven't listened to our previous episode covering why so many of us drink, the cultural pressures, emotional overload, and quiet habits that creep in through midlife, go and check that out. Today we're exploring what happens next, what life looks like when you start cutting back or stop drinking alcohol altogether. By the end of this conversation, you'll learn how the brain and body reset after drinking less or going alcohol-free, why joy, energy, and emotional stability often return stronger than before, and how to build a fulfilling life that doesn't include alcohol. Remember, this is general information only, not personal medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare provider for guidance. Sarah Rusbatch is a certified grey area drinking coach, keynote speaker, and the author of the best-selling book, Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Without Alcohol. After her own turning point in 2019, when just a few glasses to unwind became something harder to control, Sarah made the brave decision to stop drinking, and in doing so discovered a calmer, clearer, far more fulfilling life than she'd imagined possible. Today she helps women all over the world do the same. Understand the why behind their drinking, find freedom from guilt and shame, and rebuild their confidence, energy, and joy. So Sarah, it's one thing to realize that alcohol isn't serving you, but it's another thing to actually do something about it. You know, we're all drowning in information, but actually making a decision to move forward with something is really challenging. How do you recommend people reduce alcohol? Like, do you suggest they just gradually reduce it? Do you suggest going cold turkey? Are there pros and cons? Are both acceptable? What way do you tend to suggest people go?
So the first thing to say to that is if you are physically addicted to alcohol, you must never go cold turkey because it can be fatal. And so it's about, first of all, asking yourself, how much am I drinking? And is this an amount where it could actually cause very, very serious issues if I was to suddenly stop? So no one should go cold turkey if they're drinking significant amounts. And if you're unsure, get advice from your GP. Otherwise, I recommend taking a 30-day break and doing it in the support of one of my challenges or one of the other amazing sober programs that are out there, because doing it with other women makes a big difference. And doing it for 30 days is enough time to just be able to go, right. You know, I started drinking at 14. By the time I stopped at 43, I drank alcohol for 29 years. I didn't really know life without it. And I remember saying to myself, the first time I took a break, I intended to do 21 days. I was like, well, what's 21 days out of my life? And I always say, if someone says to me, oh, I can't do 30 days, like I've got that party, I've got that wedding, I've got that holiday. If you can't do 30 days, I would say that's a very clear sign that you need to do 30 days because we've probably got a very significant emotional reliance on alcohol. So give yourself the opportunity to take 30 days off and see it as an experiment. Don't see it as anything more than that, but just, okay, let's get some data. Let's see, how does my sleep change? How does my mood change? How does my motivation change? Does my anxiety reduce? Do I feel more positive? Do my relationships improve? Do I lose weight? Does my skin look better? Like, just get some reference points to do this little experiment on yourself.
And do you recommend that people navigate this by telling people what they're doing or not telling people what they're doing? Like, if they're in a social situation, do they, drink alcohol-free wine, or do they pretend to hold a glass of wine not to draw attention to it? Or like, how do you recommend people approach that one?
I think it totally depends who you're with. So, like with close people, most grey area drinkers have got to a point where their mental health is starting to suffer as a result of their drinking. And so turning around to the people that you care about and that you love and go, my mental health's been really, really rubbish. And I want to just take a break from booze and see if it improves. So I'm going to be taking a break for a while. I'd love your support. And so I'm just going to be drinking alcohol-free drinks. And, the alcohol-free drinks are amazing now. You can go to a party and no one even knows that you're not drinking alcohol. I was at a dinner party and a woman I'd never met before went to pour me a glass of wine at the table. And I said, "Oh, no, I don't drink, thank you." And she looked at me and she went, "Why? Are you an alcoholic?" I was just like, wow, I've never met you before. And your association, sometimes it can just be about going, "I'm on antibiotics," like whatever you want to say, just to make the situation pass. Because it can be hard and we don't need pressure from other people to make it even harder.
I've had a couple of, which I've never used that phrase before, gray area drinkers, but we've been working quite hard to really reduce their drinking. And in fact, they stopped. And then a few of them have sort of, fallen back into their old habits. And there has been a lot of guilt and shame entwined in it. And then that sort of feeling of like, oh, well, and my friend said I don't really think I have a problem anyway. So it's that whole mixed emotion of, they are disappointed in themselves and they're feeling, a bit horrible about it. But then it's that default. Well, look, I was never an alcoholic anyway. So in fact, why am I even doing this in the first place? How do you help people navigate whenever they do fall off the wagon? I don't know if that's the right phrase.
The thing that I teach people is that it's all part of the process. Like, I don't know anyone that decided to change their drinking habits and then just bang, that was it. Like, it's often a process. The thing about gray area drinkers, 99% of the women that come to me, they want me to make them a moderate drinker. So they want to be someone that can just have a glass of champagne every now and then or a red wine with their steak, but they don't think about alcohol anymore. They're not relying on it anymore. So they want to be a take it or leave it drinker. But the research, the science, all the neuroscience that I've studied shows once you've created those neural pathways in the brain that associate stress or emotional discomfort with using alcohol as a solution, you're probably never going to be able to be a moderate drinker. Like, if you've got to a 6 out of 10 on that scale, you could take a month off, 3 months off, or a year off. And if you pick up a drink again, you will be right back where you were. And I did that twice. I did 100 days, 2 times. And I was like, oh, I'll be fixed now. I'll be a grown-up drinker now that just has a glass of wine every now and then. And within a month, I was just back to drinking the same amount as before, because the associations are so deeply embedded in the brain of what we use alcohol for that it's very, very quick how quickly we go back there. And I teach all of this. And that's why it's so important not to just do it on your own and to actually come into a program like mine or one of the other ones that people run, because you get the neuroscience. You actually start to understand your brain and what the tips of the tools are to actually create long-term change.
You've articulated, I have to say, really clearly what I have seen in my career in medicine, that often women will say to me, I just want to be able to, have a glass of wine at a special occasion, or I just want to be able to, if I go to a barbecue or something, just have one drink. And I think you're absolutely right that it just doesn't seem to be like that's possible. It's they nearly have become, in a way, all or nothing.
Yeah, and then it becomes, well, which way am I going to go? Because there's not 3 options now, there's 2. And the option is I carry on drinking like I am, which isn't working for me anymore for whatever reason. Or I look at what life might be like for a period of time without alcohol. I don't have to stay forever, but I can get curious about what it might be like. And it's hard at the start. Like, there is no doubt that it's hard. But what I see, and I think is really sad, is most people think how hard it is at the start is how hard it will be forever. And so they go back to drinking because it's too hard. But once you get through the hard bit, your whole life starts to change and your whole world starts to open up. And that's what I see my job as, is supporting women through the hard bit to get to the bit where it gets easier, so that they too can experience everything that I have of what a life without alcohol looks like.
So, Sarah, if someone is listening and they're actually trying to support a friend or partner, so it's not them who have this issue, but maybe their best friend or the partner that they're living with, in short, what helps?
Do you know what? I don't think anything does unless that person wants help. Because we can, if the friend or partner has said to them, I want help with not drinking, that's one thing. But I get hundreds of messages from men asking me to help their wife. And I'm like, you need to get your wife to contact me. But she doesn't actually want help. But let's just say we're in a scenario where someone does want help and they're listening. Planning activities that don't involve alcohol, buying alcohol-free drinks when you're going to social events together and, not getting absolutely pissed as anything in front of them, like just showing that asking how they are, asking how it's going and how they're feeling, all of that makes a big difference. I remember my first alcohol-free Christmas and we were going to a friend's barbecue and I was quite nervous about it because I was always Sarah the party girl. I was the one that was, the life and soul of the party. And it was the first one I was going to, and she'd been to the shops and bought me alcohol-free champagne. And I just can't tell you how touched I was that she'd made that effort for me. And so little things like that do make such a
Oh,
difference.
absolutely. Offering an alternative. And I think even celebrating a small win, just to acknowledge someone that that you see them and that you're really proud of them. What are the things that friends and supportive partners might be doing that are actually hurting the person's ability to make this a success?
Drinking in front of them is really hard, particularly with partners. I did have one client's partner come home from work on a Friday. She'd done 5 days alcohol free. So he'd been and bought her a bottle of champagne to celebrate her 5 days alcohol free. And she was like, don't you get it? I want to make long-term change here. So it's really understanding what that person wants from this. Are they wanting to be alcohol free long term? Are they taking a break? Like being understanding around that. Not asking them all the time, are you triggered? Are you okay? Like, there's a fine balance with that. If you're showing genuine care and compassion, then it makes such a difference.
I think so. And I think the other thing for me is for the partner not to minimize it, to say things like, well, I never thought you had a problem anyway. And I can't see the problem with you having just one. It's so undermining to what the person's trying to do. And you did mention a little bit about couples there. It is tricky when you have one person who's trying in a couple who are trying to stop drinking and the other person isn't. Do you have any little tips for how you navigate that scenario?
Yeah, and I wrote an entire chapter in my book on this because it's the thing that I get asked about so much, where the woman's in perimenopause, she's realized that alcohol's, really not working anymore. She can't moderate. She wants to take a break. Her husband's still drinking. And it can really drive a divide because if they're a couple that have spent a lot of time drinking together and socializing has always involved alcohol, don't do what I did, which is not talk about it and then get pissed off when your partner's drinking, but you've never actually talked about why you're not drinking. Like open communication. And in my book, I take people through the 6 stages that you can go through of really making sure that it doesn't involve conflict, but knowing that there will be a period of adjustment. But then it does settle down and you find new ways to have fun and to go and connect and do different things together. But at the start, it does feel a bit clunky and a bit awkward.
Absolutely. And Sarah, when should someone seek professional help? And then what are the options that exist between sort of self-help and then rehab for someone who actually, has full alcohol addiction?
It's such an interesting one. I had a client that went to a rehab facility and said, I need support to stop drinking. And they said, how much are you drinking? And she said, 2 bottles of wine a night. So that would roughly be 140 units of alcohol a week. And the recommended is 10. And they said, oh, you're not drinking enough for us. We wouldn't be able to help you. And turned her away. She didn't fit the criteria. She was a teacher. She was still going to work. She still had a job. She still had a home. She was still a mum. And this is where there's such an issue with people that most people that end up in rehab, it's either they physically have been told by their doctor, you're going to die if you don't stop drinking, or a serious accident has happened, or they've lost their job, or there's been a major catastrophe that can drive it. Not always, but a lot of the time, where people need to have medical support to stop. Whereas for grey area drinkers, it is that grey area. And that's why what I do is so important, because it's creating community and it's creating tools and advice where you don't need the physical support to stop drinking, because you're not going into physical withdrawal, but you need the emotional and mental support that comes with all the programs that I offer.
In an ideal world, do you think that people with grey area drinking should still have the ability to go and do like an inpatient stay in some variety of program, or do you think it's something that can be managed nicely, sort of in the community and in their own home?
Yeah, like I don't know any grey area drinker that would benefit from doing that because it's taking you out. You don't have physical dependence. You don't need to be outside of your real life to stop drinking. For grey area drinkers, it's most of them will just carry on their life as normal, but just taking part in a challenge or a program to change their drinking habits.
Okay, so Sarah, we've now got our let's say our 45-year-old woman who has decided, right, that's it. I'm definitely got an issue. Let's talk through what they might experience in the first few weeks and what are they going to expect to happen in terms of their brain, their body. What's it going to be like for them once they decide, right, that's it. I'm not going to drink anymore. What would they expect?
So the first few days can be really hard and it's all consuming. And a lot of the time you're just thinking about trying not to drink. You can find the first few days that sleep is terrible because we're not getting that sedative effect of alcohol anymore that helps us to pass out and fall asleep. So some women will find in those first few nights that they really struggle to get to sleep. And that's where it can be helpful, if that's you, to speak to your GP as to whether some melatonin might help or something else just to help you with sleeping in those first few days. We can find that we might feel really tired, and that tiredness can usually last for a couple of weeks, depending on how long we've been drinking for. But it's different for everyone because it depends how much have we been consuming, how effective has our body been at metabolizing alcohol. It takes 72 hours for for alcohol to leave your system after just one or two drinks, and for your body to fully be back to life without alcohol. And so if you've been drinking consistently, most of the people that I work with have been drinking for 20, 30, 40 years. And I always say to them, you can't undo 40 years of drinking in 14 days. We have to respect our beautiful bodies. We have to be patient and to understand that there will be a period of withdrawal, even if it's not physical withdrawal in terms of, shakes and vomiting. We're probably going to feel quite tired. We need to make sure that magnesium is a great supplement during this time just to help with, replenishing our body. The magnesium is the first mineral that women who are stressed are burning through very quickly, and they're often very deficient in. So understanding what supplements can help is really good. Prioritizing just rest where we can, staying really super hydrated. And then slowly but surely we start to feel like it's a bit like going from living in black and white to living in color. So you just start to see this whole technicolor world out there where things that you hadn't noticed before, because alcohol addiction, whether it's physical addiction or emotional addiction, means we stop finding pleasure in other things. And when we remove alcohol and our dopamine levels start to rebalance after the alcohol use, we start to get pleasure from the things that had stopped bringing us pleasure because we'd only been relying on alcohol for that. So just the simplest of things, like listening to our kids laughing in the morning, being outside and see in nature, there's just simple things that start to happen. We do find for a lot of women, they can feel very emotional in that first month. And that is because we've often been using alcohol to suppress emotions. And now we're not suppressing them. We're not hiding from them anymore. So we can 1 minute feel like it literally is 1 minute. Oh my God, look at the birds, look at the sky, everything's wonderful. And then a minute later, we can be like sobbing and crying and feeling a bit like, oh my goodness, everything's terrible. It's all dreadful. And does start to rebalance, but it is part of the process for a lot of women. But gradually over time, what I just see is women are calmer. They feel clearer, they start to grow in confidence, they have more energy, they start noticing physical changes to their periods, to their hair getting thicker, to their skin looking great. And they start to, they be consistent with things like exercise goals and nutrition goals, because when we're hungover, who wants to have a kale salad for lunch versus, a big bowl of pasta? And so we start losing weight. There's lots of different things that start to happen, both emotionally, mentally, and physically.
So, Sarah, I know that you're a menopause coach as well as an alcohol coach. Do you feel like you would try and get someone or suggest your clients like get their hormones sorted out as best as possible before they try and go down the route of sorting out their alcohol. Because then you're going to potentially have that kind of double whammy effect of anxiety being caused by, the hormones dropping off in perimenopause and postmenopausally, or do you just kind of work with people where they are? So if they really want to focus on alcohol, we focus on alcohol. If they're like, look, I feel like I've got all these perimenopausal symptoms and I'm not coping and I'm having hot flushes and all these things, would you get them to do that first?
Interestingly, there's a couple of rehab facilities in America that have said the most success they've had with female clients with addiction is when they've put them on HRT before they've taken them off the alcohol, because extreme PMS can lead to very severe alcohol cravings. And when women are in perimenopause and their hormones are fluctuating, there can be extreme experiences of PMS. So I just meet women with where they're at the time. There's a lot of talk now about menopause hormone therapy. There's a lot of talk about research that had come out all those years ago as being not actually true about HRT and breast cancer. Although, interestingly, I did interview a menopause GP not that long ago, and she said something that people don't talk about is that research was all, clearly debunked and made out to not be true. But what we know is that if you're on HRT and you're drinking alcohol, those two combined will increase your chances of breast cancer, because alcohol causes increased circulation of estrogen. Plus, you're taking estrogen in the form of HRT. And hormone-positive breast cancer is excess estrogen that's not being properly processed and metabolized by the liver, that is then being altered and back circulating around the body. And yet I don't know a single woman who was told when she started taking HRT that she shouldn't be drinking alcohol at the same time. I don't know. Is that something that you talk about?
Look, I think the thing with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, I think that is can be something that's really confusing to a lot of patients. And my understanding of estrogen receptor positive breast cancer is not that estrogen caused their breast cancer at all. So if just in really simple terms, a cell is normal and a normal cell has estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors, dopamine, adrenaline, like all sorts of things that it has receptors for, and that's a normal cell. And as a cell becomes cancerous, it becomes more and more abnormal, and receptors in a way drop off. If you get to the point where you've got an estrogen receptor negative breast cancer, it means that the receptors that made it look like a breast cell, and it's become less and less and less like a normal breast tissue cell, and lots of its receptors have dropped off. And the reason that that's significant in cancer treatment is because we can manipulate that cell with that hormone, or by withdrawing that hormone. So it's not that the estrogen caused the breast cancer, but it's that you can afterwards manipulate that cell by using the receptor. So, in breast cancer, because we've got treatments that can attach onto like the Herceptin receptor, the estrogen receptor, that's why we're very interested in whether it's estrogen receptor positive or negative. And obviously, if you already had a breast cancer cell in your body, or you've got a small lump that's full of breast cancer cells and they've still got their estrogen receptors, and someone gives you a big dose of estrogen, well then your breast cancer cell is going to go yippee and going to want to grow. But I think we have to be really careful that we're not confusing that with saying that estrogen is causing your breast cancer, because that is absolutely not my understanding of it. And I think, but on the other side of what you're saying is absolutely right. Alcohol is a big risk factor. And, if in some women there is an increased risk because they potentially already have some kind of small breast cancer that they don't know about. And that's one of the reasons with my patients, before we start, we always go and have a clear ultrasound, mammogram or MRI. So I know that we're not starting something that might cause a nightmare further down the line. But the reality is that, I think that sometimes we're scared of the wrong things. And, I think that on the whole, for the vast majority of women, menopausal hormone therapy or HRT, whatever you want to call it, is incredibly helpful for so many parts of a woman's life. And it's absolutely a choice, of course. But I think that the reality is that, drinking alcohol is probably way more risky than taking HRT.
Yeah, and the Lancet, like the big medical publication, came out a couple of years ago, and they called for policymakers to ban advertising of anything linked to causing breast cancer because they're seeing such an increase in breast cancer cases. And they named alcohol. They said, we're asking policymakers to ban the commercial marketing of alcohol because of its link to increased breast cancer. And yet nothing seems to change. It'd be very interesting to see if alcohol does go down the path of tobacco or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes think of it's so culturally ingrained in the UK and Australia, and I think, politically, we have these very short election cycles. So, would there ever be the political will to push it on? It's very interesting. Um, what symptoms do you think of that period of you know, gray area drinking? There's such an overlap between symptoms that you could put down to perimenopause, like the irritability, the anxiety, and the fatigue. How do you decipher whether it's your perimenopause or whether it's your drinking?
Well, it's probably both. And that's, the fact for so many women. And so for lots of women, what I find is when they remove the alcohol, it gives them the opportunity to see, well, what are my perimenopause symptoms actually like when I'm not dealing with mid-level hangovers for a lot of the week. And so it can be both. And so you can't tell unless you take that break from alcohol. And then you get to go, okay, so what is my sleep like? What is my anxiety like? What is my mood like? But all I know is that alcohol exacerbates all of the symptoms of perimenopause. And if they were at a 4 out of 10, if you're adding alcohol to the mix, you're probably making them an 8 out of 10. And so if we want to kind of be trying to reduce what some of those symptoms are, particularly hot flushes and things like that, then reducing or removing alcohol can be really powerful for that.
Yeah, and there's definitely very good evidence to suggest if you withdraw alcohol, it won't necessarily take them away, but you seem to have lesser symptoms. How long do you think it takes for the brain? So we have our 45-year-old woman, and she's a few weeks in. How long do you think it takes for the brain's reward pathways and dopamine levels to recalibrate to look like someone who hasn't been grey area drinking? Do we have any sort of research on that?
So when I did my coach training several years ago, the research was saying longer term to create full homeostasis back to our neurotransmitters after drinking, it can take over a year. But I see in lots of women that I work with, that kind of 90 days seems to be a really good amount of time to start seeing some balance in those neurotransmitters. But we've got to be careful because a lot of people do have cross addiction where they will stop drinking and then they swap alcohol for sugar or they swap alcohol for scrolling. Or so we're just going to, be really mindful of that because we do live in a world where, dopamine addiction is everywhere we go, whether it's scrolling, online shopping, sugar, gambling, porn, online gaming, all of the things, they're so easily available to us. So finding those simple ways to get effort-based dopamine. So exercise is great, cold water therapy is great, getting time outside in nature is great. And just, starting to find ways to create fun and interest and enjoyment in our lives that aren't relying on a phone or an alcoholic substance or food or whatever.
Yeah, I've had a few patients recently tell me that they've given up alcohol, but two of them started vaping, and they were feeling awful and so guilty about it because they were hiding their vaping from their teenage children, who they said in their own words they'd been horrified if their teenagers were vaping, and there they were vaping. And the other one was telling me recently that she was just compulsively shopping, just constantly buying things on Instagram at night. Just she said it's actually embarrassing. There's just parcels constantly arriving. What are your strategies to help work through that kind of boredom? Because I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's like doing something and getting a dopamine hit another way.
Yeah, and I think it's two things. So I think we've got to make sure that we're getting natural dopamine. Exercise. I don't know anyone that successfully removed alcohol from their life where exercise didn't play a part. So for me, I used to go to a body attack class on a Friday night at the gym at 5 o'clock. And that was the thing I did instead of drinking. And it made me feel great. It was challenging. You're moving your body, you're getting the endorphins. And so effort-based dopamine is great in getting that exercise. And then it's, well, what am I adding in to my life in the evenings or with that spare time that I've got, whether it be, starting to look at online courses that I might want to do, or starting to think about some new hobbies that I might want to take up. And that's where it gets really interesting. And I see women go back to university. I see them go and start them in tap dancing classes or horse riding lessons or joining a choir or joining a hip hop dance class or whatever it might be, but starting to add in where we've taken the alcohol out.
This episode is brought to you by my 16-week Rediscover You program, designed specifically for women navigating the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. If you're dealing with disrupted sleep, mood changes, or unexplained weight gain, this evidence-based program combines medical guidance, practical tools, and a supportive community to help you take control of your health. Women have reported significant improvements in symptom management of sleep quality and overall well-being. As an All About You listener, when you mention the podcast, you'll gain priority access for our next intake. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and join. I'd love to help you rediscover the vibrant, confident version of yourself. I've had a few patients who've really struggled with their friendship group. And there's definitely been a period of nearly like grieving. And a few of them have really had to, I suppose, make a decision to move on from that group because, they felt that potentially they weren't particularly supported. People were telling them that they were being boring by not drinking anymore. And I think that can really bring a lot of fear to women because I think we often love our friends and we're scared of being lonely. We're scared of being rejected. And that can feel like a big step to potentially walk away from a group of people who you've cared deeply about, but also you've realized that all your socialization revolves around alcohol. Can you talk to that? Have you experienced that with your clients?
Yeah, and I've experienced that myself. And there's a whole chapter in the book on this as well. And it's about remembering that we probably have different friends in our lives for different seasons of our lives. And they may have been, I've definitely got friends that were my drinking friends. And the relationship didn't go too much deeper than that. But there were other friends where, yeah, I got pissed with them, but the friendship is still super deep now because there was so much more to it. And so it's recognizing that we've probably got different categories of friends, and there will be some friends where the friendship might really slip away, but then that often leaves room for new people to come into our lives as well, because we start taking up new hobbies and new interests, and we've got more in common with them in that season of our life. So I always say to women, don't be afraid of that. It's actually a really exciting transition, but we feel such a sense of loyalty so often, women, that we think that we've failed if we haven't maintained the friendship. But if you're at different stages, then who knows? Like I found for myself anyway, that when I stopped drinking, there's a number of people who I thought they would never stop drinking, but you'd never be, never be surprised at the impact you're having on people, what you don't realize. And then they come and go, oh, I'm going to take a break from booze now as well. And so it's an interesting journey.
Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I realize that the word never nearly needs to be removed from our vocabulary because it's so heavy and it restricts you and never say never, basically. The other thing I find really interesting is that women who have thought alcohol was calming them down will often describe within a few months they realize that they are actually much calmer and they're more productive in life again. Do we know what is going on there?
The GABA that the alcohol causes us to produce only happens in that moment, but it actually downregulates our GABA receptors. So we are making ourselves deficient in GABA in a general term by drinking. When we stop drinking, our GABA receptors get the chance to rejuvenate. And then we find that throughout our day, throughout our life, regardless of not having the alcohol, that we start to feel calmer. We start to find ways of feeling more relaxed. We're less impatient. We're not snapping at the kids. Like all of those little moments where we used to just be impatient and tense and cross, they just start to disappear, which is great.
And what about sleep? How quickly do you see sleep improving?
It's usually only a few days. And then it starts to really, and then women are like, oh my God, like the first thing they say is, I haven't been dreaming for so many years. And now I wake up and I'm having these crazy dreams because because I haven't been getting REM sleep. I haven't been doing the dreaming. So they will really notice. And then they're like, oh my God, I love my sleep now. It's so good.
I think sleep is, as I said earlier, I think sleep is honestly so transformational. And when you're not sleeping, everything in the world seems like awful and harder. And not sleeping impacts not only your mental health so much, your ability to get through your day, your sort of emotional sort of stability and being able to cope, but even right down to your weight, because when cortisol is through the roof, people often just end up with all this stubborn belly fat, and then they're craving carbs, and we're just in this complete vicious circle. And certainly when women come in to see me, often with symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, I usually very much say, well, we're going to really focus on getting you sleeping. And they're like, but what about my weight? Are you going to help me with my weight? And I say, well, can I get you sleeping first? And then let's watch everything kind of fall into place. And a lot of the time, just changing someone's sleep it's actually a game changer.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
there was a study in the BMJ, which is the British Medical Journal, and it showed that alcohol reduction actually improved life satisfaction. So whenever people reduced alcohol or stopped drinking alcohol, they actually were happier with their life. Again, is that something that you think, because you've got a massive group of women, is that what you're hearing?
Oh God, a million times over, million times. And the number one reason for that is alcohol destroys gut health, and 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. And serotonin is what helps us to feel good. So when we remove alcohol, we start increasing our serotonin production. So our general sense of well-being starts to improve. I'm in the middle of running an alcohol-free challenge at the moment. I've got 650 women in there who are all taking 30 days off booze together. And honestly, every time I go into my group, I just smile from ear to ear because they're just like, I just feel so much happier. I feel so much more joy. I'm just noticing glimmers in my day that I used to miss all the time. And that sense of well-being starts to really return.
And isn't that just so important? Because not everyone, but so many people are so dissatisfied with life right now. So many people are exhausted, overwhelmed, sick of everything, sick of the news, sick of the bad news, not enjoying their lives, just feeling busy, busy, busy and overwhelmed. And then you can do this one thing and suddenly actually your life becomes a little bit more colorful. And you're just like, wow, actually maybe this thing called life isn't so bad after all.
Yeah, and I've got women that thought they were going to have to leave their job and they thought their job was awful and they were so miserable, but actually they have removed alcohol and fallen back in love with their jobs again and realized that actually when they've got more energy and productivity and motivation, they like their job. It's hard to like something when you're feeling 5 out of 10 most of the time.
So, how do you coach your women to navigate? Okay, so our woman has navigated through her first 90 days, and it's coming up to Christmas time. How do you coach about navigating through stress, family, conflict, get-together, celebrations without kind of defaulting and falling into old patterns? Do you have any strategies that you could share with us?
Yeah, so alcohol-free drinks are great. I find for so many of my women that having an alcohol-free beer, alcohol-free gin and tonic, alcohol-free champagne really, really scratches the itch when they feel that need. What I think is that we start setting boundaries when we remove alcohol and we start saying no a little bit more. We stop people pleasing as much. We start checking in with ourselves because we develop a deeper sense of self connection of, am I knackered? Do I want to go to that thing? Am I, or am I just going to say no? So we actually start taking back some of our own autonomy on what we do and don't want to do. I teach a lot of women in my programs some really great stress management techniques through breath work, through yoga nidra, through journaling that they can go through when they're experiencing a trigger, and some real techniques of what they can do when they've got a really intense craving and what to do instead. But it's also about remembering, a craving is like a contraction. It doesn't last. And so it's just riding the wave of that, distracting ourselves, doing something else, playing it forward, thinking about, well, how will I feel if I drink tonight? How am I going to feel tomorrow? How do I want to feel tomorrow? And then just really starting to, plan things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were hungover, like that 7 a.m. yoga class or that 7 a.m. meeting a friend for a run and a breakfast or whatever. And so just starting to create a rich and fulfilling life. But I always say that, now you've got more chance of seeing me at 5 a.m. than you are at 9 p.m. And a lot of my social life is done early mornings with loads of catch ups. And I love sleep so much that I'm in bed by 9 o'clock and getting my 8 hours that way. And so we'll just find that life might just start to change a little bit, and that's okay.
What about the person listening who's got social anxiety and they've used alcohol to get them through at a party? They've had a glass of wine before they've even headed out to that party because they feel like they can't cope. Um, I suppose my approach to that, and I would absolutely love to learn from you, is to say to my patients, look, to be honest, the first 10 to 15 minutes at that party or social interaction might be pretty tricky and it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but let's try and push through because you might just find that you do really end up enjoying yourself. But I'm sure you have much better strategies than that.
Honestly, but you've nailed it, because it is the first 15 minutes are clunky. I can feel clunky even now. I'm 6.5 years alcohol free. And if I'm going to an event with people I don't know that well and they're all drinking, I can feel a little bit clunky. But I always remember it within 15 minutes, that's all gone. And so get yourself, plan in your head what you're going to say if someone asks what you want to drink. Make sure you've maybe phoned the bar in advance and go, do you have alcohol free drinks or can I bring my own? Like little things like that can really help. And also ask yourself, do I really want to go to this thing? Is this thing something where everyone who's there, their sole intention is to get as drunk as possible? And how fun is that going to be for me if I'm not drinking? And, we get to start picking and choosing what we want to go to and remembering that being in a crowded, busy place with loads of drunk people might not actually be that much fun. And maybe you prefer doing smaller, more intimate catch ups with closer friends over a lunch in a couple of days' time. Like still make sure you're getting your connection, but work out what kind of person are you and how do you like to connect with people? Because I have a lot of women who are actually introverts and they drink to give them the confidence to be in those big groups, but actually they hate it. It's like, well, here's the thing. You don't have to go anymore. You're a 48-year-old woman. You can say no. And instead you can go, those two women, I love those women. Maybe I'll reach out to them and see if they want to do a brunch next weekend instead.
Yeah.
Like make those choices.
Yeah. So be quite intentional about kind of filling your cup, but in a different way. Sarah, you described yourself at the beginning as whenever you were drinking, your identity was fun Sarah, life of the party Sarah, and funny Sarah. How have you sort of reestablished who you really are without alcohol?
It takes time, but a friend said to me the other day, she went, "You're so much funnier now that you don't drink." And I was like, yeah, boom, that's such great feedback. I think it takes time. Like you grow in confidence, you get to know yourself. I've done a lot of work on myself over this 6 years. I went to therapy for a year and just unpacked a lot of stuff. I do a lot of nervous system regulation work. I know myself now and I'm selective with what I go to, but I will still go to a concert and be dancing all night. I still go. I love catching up with girlfriends and getting dressed up and going out. But now you're more likely to see me like head out the door after a couple of hours when they're all spitting in my face. I'm like, yep, right, time to go home. And then I wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, go for my 6 a.m. run, and they're all in bed hungover all day.
And what about women who are listening who are worried that if they stop drinking, they're going to start eating more? I mean, I always say you're drinking so many calories that if you're concerned about calories, you are actually drinking a lot of calories. So you're likely to lose weight, not gain weight. But for some women, they will say to me, "Oh no, if I don't drink, then I'll just keep eating and I'll get bigger and bigger."
And that's where I think we've got to be mindful of what dopamine actions are we swapping the drinking for. And if we're getting dopamine fixes through exercise, through sunlight, through cold water exposure, for all of those things, then the likelihood of us needing to eat loads will become less. And just starting to learn about the nutrients that women need. I run a program called Thrive After 40, which is actually teaching women in peri and postmenopause, this is the nutrients your body needs to feel great. and this is how you can prep your meals. These are some great meal ideas. This is how to get your protein. This is, and the women just get the most insane results because they're coming into a place of actually being taught how to eat the nutrients that their body needs. And they're all just losing weight like easily because they're feeling full, they're eating well, and there's no more snacking on ultra processed food and sugar and everything like that.
Yeah, amazing. Sarah, you have been incredible. I would love to finish by asking you, do you have any inspirational, de-identified stories that you could tell us that maybe would resonate with our listeners, and to, tell them a little bit of a story of someone who you've watched go from being a gray area drinker to really going on to more than survive, but just absolutely thrive?
I could probably give you 10,000 stories, Shauna. We worked out the other day, I've had 10,000 women go through my programs. And I'm thinking of Fleur, who's become like one of my closest friends. And she was probably about 10 kilos overweight, smoking, drinking, not looking after herself. She now runs ultra marathons. She's done 100K. She's 52. Her and I are flying to London in April to run London Marathon together for my 50th. I feel like I'm aging backwards. I feel like I'm about to turn 50 and that my life is just getting started. This has just been the warm up. Like what removing alcohol has given me in terms of clarity, confidence, energy, motivation, and real intention for how I want to live my life and what I want to get out of it. I'm no longer living on an autopilot. And that's what so many women say to me, is how much they realize that they are just getting so much more out of their lives from making that decision to change their drinking. And don't just think about how it impacts you. I hosted an alcohol-free cocktail party in Melbourne, and a woman came up to me and she saw me and she started crying, and she said, "You'll never know the impact of me doing your program, what it's had on my life." She said, "And I've got a letter for you from my son." And her son was 13. And he wrote, "Dear Sarah, thank you for giving me my mum back." We become way more present with our kids when we make that decision to change our drinking.
It's so interesting because it's a question I often ask my patients. What do your kids say about their drinking? And they often say, "Oh yeah, no, they don't know about it," or "No, they don't really say anything." And I always think, "No, you are so wrong. They absolutely do know."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was, one of the proudest moments for me was when I'd had a really stressful day and my daughter was sitting outside the office, and I came off my last Zoom call and it was like 7 o'clock, and she goes, Mama, come with me. I know you've had a really busy day. And she'd run me a bath. She'd lit candles. She'd like put the music on for me, turned off the lights, put my favorite bubble bath. And I was like, a few years ago, she'd have gone and got me a bottle of wine. My go-to is a bubble bath with my essential oils. And like they pick up on every single thing we do. Don't underestimate it. And monkey see, monkey do. They know that the evidence is out there that daughters of women with alcohol use disorder, which is defined as 14 or more units per week, are something like 70% more likely to develop alcohol use disorder themselves because of what's been modeled to them as self-care for women.
Wow, isn't that so interesting? But you know what I think is really hopeful is that I do think this next generation who are in their 20s, I think in so many ways they are so ahead of the game with us in terms of wellness, like I've got 4 children and 2 of them are in their 20s, and I have to say, I watch the activities that they organize, and it's meetups at the gym, and it's going off and doing Pilates and various things that, and I just think, gosh, it is really hopeful that, and I seem to read that the statistics say that people are drinking, well, certainly that generation are drinking less and less. So hopefully, in 20 years' time, whenever they're in their 40s, they won't be in the position that so many women are today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a new study that just came out last week, which was done on tracking drinking habits in Australia. And Gen Z are drinking the least of any generation at that age.
How good is that? I just think it's awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Sarah, you have been amazing. I would love talking to you. I know so many people listening will want to know how they can find you, how they can join one of your coaching groups. What way does it work?
Get a copy of my book, Beyond Booze. If this podcast interview has piqued your interest at all, it's a great place to start. It's got my story in there. It's got millions of tips. It's written for midlife women. I have a free Facebook community called the Women's Wellbeing Collective. And that's a great place to come. It's got 25,000 women just to start being exposed to other women talking about the benefits of their alcohol-free life and to start changing the information that we're learning. And then if you go to my website, sararusbatch.com, you will be able to see all the programs that I have. I run alcohol-free challenges for women 4 times a year. I have a program called Thrive After 40, which is all about shifting stubborn belly fat, increasing energy, understanding the nutrient needs for women in peri and post-menopause. And then I've got a couple of other programs about enhancing our mental and emotional well-being as we age. And I'm super present on Instagram as well, where you'll find me at Sarah Rusbatch.
Here are my 3 takeaways from today's conversation with Sarah. Your body is built to heal. Within just a few weeks of reducing or removing alcohol, your brain chemistry, hormones, and sleep patterns begin to reset, proving that your midlife body still has incredible capacity for renewal. Real joy takes time to rewire. As your dopamine system recalibrates, the quick highs fade, but what replaces them is deeper, steadier happiness. Movement, nature, music, and genuine connection becomes the new reward pathways. Sobriety isn't about less, it's about more. When you fill the space alcohol once occupied with intention and curiosity, you rediscover energy, creativity, and confidence you didn't know you'd lost. Life doesn't shrink without alcohol, it expands. I think what today's conversation with Sarah reminds us is that change doesn't have to come from crisis. It can come from curiosity. For many of us, alcohol has been woven into the fabric of our social lives and self-care routines. But when we pause long enough to ask, what am I really looking for here? The answers are often gentler than we'd expect. Maybe it's rest, maybe it's connection, maybe it's a moment to exhale. And when we learn to give ourselves those things directly, without the glass between us and our feelings, something really beautiful happens. We start showing up clearer, calmer, and more connected to ourselves and the people we love. If this resonated, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave us a voice note at allaboutyoupod.com/voicemail. I'd love to hear your questions for future episodes. And remember, this information is general in nature and not intended to replace personalized medical advice. Always speak to your healthcare provider for guidance about your own situation. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, and I'll see you next time on All About You.